Lesson 8: Transmission Terminology and Attendance to Hadith Circles. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma akhrijna min zulumatil wahm wa akrimna bi nuril fahm. Allahumma aftah alayna abwaba rahmatik وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Welcome to Lesson 8 about transmission terminology and attendance to Hadith circles. In the previous lesson, we dealt with some names and generations of reporters. In this lesson, we will deal with transmission terminology and attendance to Hadith circles. The Hadith scholars utilized certain terms to indicate the sources and modes of their narrations. These Arabic terms have been commonly misunderstood by those unfamiliar to the field of Hadith. The following are the most common terminologies and their abbreviations used. 1. Haddathana, he said to us, which is commonly written as thana or na as abbreviations. This term was mostly used to indicate learning through the first method, that is, the teacher reading the hadith. Another is akhbarana, or he informed us, which is mostly written as ana and rarely as arana. Some scholars use it as a synonym for haddathana and vice versa, but it was most commonly used to indicate the second method, that is, the student reading to the teacher. Another is amba'ana, he told us. In cases of ijaza or permission and munawala, that is handing over a book of traditions or a hadith, this term was used. Another is sami'a, he heard. Used strictly for the first method of learning, that is sama, that is reading or recital by the teacher. Another is an, that is on the authority of so and so, used to refer to all the methods of learning. It was considered the most inferior method of narrating due to its vagueness. Since the terms haddathana and akhbarana implied oral transmission, it was generally believed that the hadith were transmitted orally for at least 100 years. However, the records show that many companions of the Prophet wrote down hadith, so did their students and their students' students. Furthermore, almost all learning methods mentioned previously depended almost totally on written material. And even the first method, that is the recital, involved dictation from written material in many cases. Thus, the literal meanings of the terms haddathana and akhbarana are not applicable, as they were used to refer to transmission from written material in the vast majority of cases. Regular records of attendance were kept. After a book was read, a note was written by the teacher or one of the famous scholars in attendance, in which the names of those who heard the whole book, part of the book, the dates, and places. If the student was under 5, he was classified as an attendee, while those over 5 were rated as students. This certificate usually had a stipulation called tibaq, that no further entries could be made in the book. During the era of the Tabi'un, students usually memorized the whole Quran and studied Islamic law and Arabic grammar before joining the circles of the Hadith scholars around the age of 20. The Sunni scholar Az-Zuhri spoke of 15-year-old Ibn Uyayna as the youngest student he had seen, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal began his Hadith studies at the age of 16. By the way, Muhammad ibn Muslim ibn Ubaidullah ibn Abdullah ibn Sihab az-Zuhri, also referred to as Ibn Shihab or az-Zuhri, was a Tabi'i Arab jurist and traditionist or muhaddith, credited with pioneering the development of Sirah Maghazi, or what we call as prophetic biography, and Hadith literature. While Abu Muhammad Sufyan ibn Uyayna ibn Maymun al-Hilali al-Kufi was a prominent Sunni religious scholar of Hadith and Quran exegesis or tafsir in Mecca, from the third generation of Muslims, referred to as the Tabi'ut Tabi'in, that is the followers of the followers. However, in later periods, when texts were fixed and learning meant transmission of books, it was said that if a child could discriminate between a cow and a donkey, he was old enough to start learning Hadith. For example, Ibn Ishaq ibn Ibrahim ad-Darabi transmitted Abdul Razak's book, and when he died, ad-Dabari was only 7 years old. By the way, Abu Ya'qub Ishaq ibn Ibrahim ad-Darabi was a Yemeni scholar reputed as one of the most important transmitters of Abdul Razak's scholarly corpus. While Abdul Razak ibn Hammam ibn Nafi as-San'ani was an 18th century Sunni Yemeni Hadith scholar purportedly of Persian descent, who compiled a Hadith collection known as the Musannaf of Abdul Razak. With every generation, the numbers of teachers and students grew exponentially. In the time of the Tabi'un, scholars like Sufyan al-Thawri, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, and az-Zuhri made reference to hundreds of teachers. Az-Zuhri himself had over 50 students who recorded Hadith in writing from him. The actual numbers who wrote and attended his lectures are unknown. The growing number of transmitters resulted in a tremendous growth in the number of books and the numbers of Hadith narrations, and it became a common practice among Hadith scholars to count every isnad as one Hadith. Consequently, a single statement of the Prophet narrated by 100 isnads was referred to as 100 hadith, and a few thousand hadith became hundreds of thousands of hadith. Next meeting, we will deal with some rulings on the classification of hadith, inshallah. For more similar lessons, subscribe to Wayfaring with Mansoor channel. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wabarakatuh.